The camera wasn't supposed to stop rolling. That was the first shock. The second? The way the entire room froze when Jason Orley slowly lowered his headset, exhaled through his teeth, and muttered something so quietly that only the sound engineer heard it. "We can't use any of this." And yet that wasn't even the moment that detonated the disaster. The real explosion came later, when Meghan Markle found out just how catastrophically things had gone behind her back. But before we get to her reaction, you need to understand how a simple cameo worth $5 million unraveled into the kind of Hollywood humiliation that people still whisper about in studio hallways. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone walk into a room with absolute certainty, convinced they're about to deliver their big redemption moment, only to slowly realize that everyone else there is quietly bracing for impact? That's what this story is. 1 hour on set, one scene, less than 2 pages of dialogue. And somehow, it still managed to become a chain reaction of embarrassment, frustration, and behind-the-scenes chaos so unexpected that even veteran producers were caught staring at each other like, is this really happening? Because according to insiders, this wasn't just a cameo. This was supposed to be Meghan's triumphant re-entry into Hollywood, the moment she proved to every director, producer, critic, and studio head that she still had the talent, charm, presence, and discipline to command the screen. A short appearance, yes, but high-profile, buzzworthy, and directed by someone whose rising status in the industry meant real visibility. But the thing about Hollywood? It has a memory like an elephant. It forgets nothing, especially not mistakes. And this cameo, whether Meghan anticipated it or not, was the kind of test the industry gives you when they want to know if you're worth the risk. Show up, hit your marks, deliver your lines, leave the crew whispering, "Wow, she's still got it." Except that's not what happened. What happened instead was the kind of spiraling, slow-motion breakdown that no PR team could spin, no agent could excuse, and no director could pretend didn't matter. It was the kind of performance, not on camera, but off, that made Jason Orley and the producers face an impossible decision. Keep her scene and hope editing could save it, or cut the cameo entirely and face the wildfire that would inevitably come with that choice. Think about it. Cutting a cameo from a high-budget production is expensive, annoying, disruptive. And when the talent's name carries the weight that Meghan Markle's does, controversial or not, you don't make that kind of decision lightly. You especially don't make it quietly. But here's the part that makes this story matter now. This wasn't just a cut. This wasn't just a director saying, "Let's redo the scene." This was a full removal, a complete deletion, a surgical extraction of every frame that featured Meghan. And that forces the real question. What on earth happened in that studio to convince an entire production team that removing her entirely was safer than keeping her in? Was it the forgotten lines? The repeated takes? The tension with the crew? The reactions from producers watching through the monitors? Or something else, something Meghan never anticipated and that no one around her had the courage to tell her directly? That's what this story will reveal. But to understand the chaos that unfolded, you have to see the build-up, the pressure, the tension, the expectation. Because when Meghan walked onto that set, she wasn't just there to say a few lines. She was there to prove a point. She needed this cameo to hit. She needed this moment to land. Hollywood is unforgiving, especially to someone who left it, returned to it, then demanded it welcome her back on her own terms. Meghan had something to prove, not just to the industry, but to the public, the critics, the fans, the tabloids, and even her own inner circle. And if you believe the insiders who watched the scene unfold, that pressure wasn't invisible. It clung to her like humidity, tightening her movements, sharpening her reactions, and making every small mistake feel like a visible crack. And maybe that's why the first line slip didn't seem like a big deal. Actors forget lines all the time. That's not unusual. But when it happened again, and again, and again, and again, well, that's when the crew started glancing at each other. Not mocking, not rude, just confused, curious, concerned, because these weren't complex monologues. These were simple lines, almost too simple, if we're being honest. You'll see the exact dialogue later in this story, and you can judge for yourself. But the difficulty wasn't the wording. It was something else, something deeper. Have you ever been so desperate to prove yourself that the pressure becomes the very thing that sinks you? That's what it felt like. Every take seemed to tighten the knot in Meghan's shoulders, twist her voice, flatten her tone. Lines that should have been lighthearted kept collapsing. Jokes that were meant to land with ease came out stiff. Reactions that should have felt spontaneous looked practiced, then over-practiced, then fragile. And yet, no one on set said a word. Because what do you say to a duchess who shows up expecting a spotlight? How do you give feedback, direction, correction, without stepping into political quicksand? Directors are used to offering guidance. Actors are used to receiving it. But you could tell, according to multiple sources, that no one wanted to be the one to say something that might trigger a PR nightmare. And that silence? That hesitation? It only made everything worse. The assistant kept whispering, "Try it again, you've got this." The script supervisor kept flipping pages as if searching for an answer. The camera operator kept resetting the shot with the slow patience of someone who knows the day just got a whole lot longer. But still, no one stopped the scene. No one addressed the problem directly, until finally, something happened that forced Jason Orley to intervene. Jason Orley, for those who don't know, isn't a temperamental director. He's not the type to yell, storm around, or throw equipment, the way some directors do when a scene goes sideways. He's known for being calm, professional, and quietly confident. But even he reached his limit. And what triggered that breaking point was something so small, so seemingly insignificant, that the moment would have been forgotten forever if Meghan hadn't reacted the way she did. We'll get to that moment. But first, you need to understand the atmosphere on set. The way the crew started shifting their weight from foot to foot. The way the lighting team kept exchanging glances. The way the makeup artist stood behind the monitor chewing her lip. This wasn't just a bad take. It was a brewing storm. A silent, collective realization that something was off. Because as the mistakes piled up, Meghan began to crack. Not outwardly at first, but in her eyes. In the way her breathing changed. In the way she whispered to her assistant between takes. In the way she turned slightly away from the cameras, as though the entire set had become too bright, too loud, too judgmental. And this is where the contradictions began. Meghan insisted she wanted a comeback. Yet she wasn't ready to take direction. She said she wanted a fresh start. Yet she kept blaming the lighting, the script, the background noise, the cues, the marks, and even, at one point, the teleprompter. There wasn't one. It was a swirl of excuses that left the crew both confused and increasingly frustrated. Now, imagine being Jason Orley, watching all of this unfold through the monitor, knowing that every minute lost cost money. Knowing that if he didn't step in soon, this cameo would spiral into something unrecoverable. And then, something happened. Something that made him pause the cameras, lower his headset, and step onto the set. This moment is crucial to the story. It was the turning point, the split-second decision that changed everything that followed. But before we get there, you need one more piece of context. Meghan didn't know she was being judged. Not truly. Not in the way that mattered. She thought she was being accommodated, supported, allowed to settle in. She didn't understand that the producers watching through the glass were already whispering, calculating, questioning whether her scene would survive the final cut. She didn't know that on the other side of the wall, two executives were already debating whether they could justify the cameo cost if the scene didn't improve dramatically within the next hour. She didn't know that the more she tried to control the situation, the less control she actually had. And she definitely didn't know what Jason Orley was about to do next. Because that moment, his decision to intervene, to stop the cameras, to step onto set, was not just the beginning of the end. It was the moment the entire cameo began to unravel. And what came next would change everything. Because Jason Orley wasn't the first person to act against her, it's incredible how a single scene, just one, can carry the weight of an entire comeback. But that's exactly what Meghan Markle believed when she accepted the cameo role that would eventually go up in smoke. Before any forgotten lines, before Jason Orley's breaking point, before the producers whispered behind the glass, there was something far more powerful driving every step she took onto that set. The belief that this cameo wasn't just a moment. It was her moment, her reset, her return, her public declaration that she was ready to reclaim her Hollywood throne. But let me start with a question that no one in Meghan's camp ever dared to ask her out loud. What happens when you build your entire redemption arc around a moment you're not prepared for? Because from the beginning, this cameo was never just a cameo. It was a $5 million statement. A symbol. A carefully crafted piece of the larger narrative Meghan had been trying to shape since the day she stepped away from the royal family and tried to rebrand herself as a global humanitarian entrepreneur, content creator, public figure hybrid. A cameo might seem small on paper, but here? No. This was strategic, calculated, a chess move. But the irony, and there will be plenty of irony in this story, is that the move she thought would save her image ultimately became the one that exposed every crack she was trying to hide. Let's rewind. Months before the cameras rolled, Meghan's team had been searching for a way, any way, to put her back in Hollywood conversations without risking another PR disaster. Leading roles were out. Supporting roles were too risky. Documentaries were exhausted. Animation didn't help. Podcasts fizzled. Meghan needed something fresh yet safe, visible yet low pressure, high impact but low commitment. Enter the cameo, a strategically crafted two-page moment that would place Meghan on a successful director's set, give her a humorous, self-aware appearance, and let her present herself to the world as relaxed, charming, confident, and, most importantly, still employable. Because make no mistake, employability is everything in Hollywood. If the industry doesn't want you, you are done. And Meghan knew, whether she admitted it to herself or not, that she had been drifting dangerously close to that line. Every new project came with skepticism. Every announcement was met with side-eye. Every deal was examined under a microscope. This cameo? It was the perfect Trojan horse. Small enough to appear harmless, big enough to matter. The production team didn't need her, but she needed them. And that's exactly why her team pushed so hard for this appearance. Why the discussions dragged on for weeks. Why negotiations were intense. Why Meghan's attorneys and PR advisors spoke about this cameo as though it were a major lead in a blockbuster film. Because from their perspective, it was. Inside her home, Meghan treated it even more seriously. The mood was different. Focused. Charged. According to people close to the situation, she rehearsed constantly. She was determined to make the cameo flawless, to walk onto set as if she'd never left the industry. She wanted that undeniable, wow, she's still got it reaction. She wanted people whispering the one thing she hadn't heard in years. Meghan Markle nailed it. And honestly, that's not unreasonable. Comebacks begin with moments like this. Hollywood loves a redemption arc, loves a fallen star who rises again. Loves the narrative of someone underestimated proving everyone wrong. But there's a catch. Hollywood also loves authenticity, something Meghan struggles with. Not because she lacks talent. Not because she lacks charisma. But because she rarely allows herself to be anything other than polished, curated, image-managed, and over-controlled. And that persona, when brought onto a set where spontaneity and vulnerability are expected, creates tension. The crew knew before she arrived. A memo had gone around, friendly in tone but unmistakably cautious. Treat her kindly. Treat her gently. Give her space. Be discreet. Avoid crowding her. Don't comment on royal topics. Don't ask questions about her children. Don't request selfies. Don't mention controversies, past or present. Let her do her job. It was a lot. One lighting tech made a joke that they'd get fewer instructions working on a nuclear facility. Still, everyone was ready to make it work. Because that's what crews do. Professionalism is built into the job. People show up. They work. They adapt. But from the moment Meghan stepped on set, everything shifted. Not because she did something terrible. Not because she stormed in with diva demands. But because of something subtler. She walked in with expectations, big expectations, that the room would bend around her. She entered wearing the kind of posture that said, "This is important. This will go perfectly. Nothing can go wrong." But something always goes wrong. Always. And when your confidence is built on perfection instead of preparation, even the smallest unexpected hiccup can crack the foundation. Crew members later said the vibe felt tight. Not intentionally. Just pressured. Heavy. Meghan wanted everything to be flawless. Controlled. Exact. And that kind of energy can suffocate a set that's used to flexibility, improvisation, spontaneity, and rolling with the moment. Still, at first, it looked like things might go well. The director greeted her warmly. The assistant director walked her through the shooting schedule. The makeup team gave her a final touch-up. Her assistant hovered with water, notes, a phone set to silent mode. Everything was calm until rehearsal started. Because here's something audiences often don't realize. Cameos are harder than they look. Not because the lines are challenging, but because cameos require blending in with an atmosphere you didn't help build. Regular cast members have rhythm, chemistry. Scenes develop an internal heartbeat. A cameo performer has seconds to sync with that rhythm. And that's where Meghan stumbled first. The tone of the scene was comedic but not slapstick. Warm but not sentimental. Energetic but not frantic. It required looseness, a kind of relaxed, playful timing that Meghan didn't quite find in rehearsal. She delivered the lines correctly, but not comfortably. The pauses were too long. The reactions too stiff. The rhythm just slightly off. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't natural. A script supervisor later described it like this. It felt like she was trying to impress the camera, not play the moment. And here's where the contradictions start again. Meghan wanted authenticity, but she approached it like strategy. She wanted natural performance, but she delivered it like a speech. She wanted ease, but she worked too hard to show it. Still, the crew was optimistic. Rehearsals are for smoothing edges. Once cameras rolled, things would click. Except they didn't. Because the lines, those simple, straightforward lines, began slipping. At first it was a word, then a phrase, then an entire sentence. The rhythm broke. The timing crumbled. The energy drained. The lines wouldn't stick. And every time she stumbled, Meghan reset with more tension in her shoulders, more pressure in her breathing, more intensity in her eyes. This cameo that was supposed to fix everything started showing signs it might break everything instead. As mistakes piled up, a quiet shift happened behind the monitors. Producers leaned closer. Writers exchanged looks. Orley rubbed his forehead. The energy changed. But Meghan? She kept pushing. She kept forcing it. She kept insisting that this moment, this cameo, had to be perfect, had to prove something, had to restore something. When an actor carries that much pressure on a single moment, the moment collapses under its own weight. Still, she didn't stop. She fought to deliver that magic take. She wanted it badly. You could see it in her eyes. You could hear it in her voice. And yet something else was happening simultaneously, something no one would talk about until much later. The cameo wasn't showcasing her talent. It was exposing her insecurities. And those insecurities, once visible, became impossible to hide. Crew members began whispering, not maliciously, but worriedly. Was she okay? Was she overwhelmed? Was the pressure too much? Why wasn't she hitting the lines when they were so simple? Could the scene be saved? Each question created more tension, more discomfort, more doubt. And all of that tension flowed toward one inevitable turning point, one that would set off the chain reaction that destroyed the cameo entirely. But before we get to that moment, you have to understand the real heart of this chapter. Meghan Markle believed with every fiber of her being that this cameo would fix everything. Her reputation, her industry standing, the Hollywood narrative around her, the doubts, the headlines, the whispers. This scene was supposed to be her reset button. And when someone puts that much emotional weight on a moment that small, the pressure becomes explosive. Because the next mistake she made wouldn't just be a slip. It would be the spark. The one spark that ignited everything that followed. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The script was supposed to be straightforward. That's what makes what happened next so unbelievable. Because when you finally see the lines Meghan struggled with, lines so simple that even the crew was confused, you start to wonder, was the script really the problem, or was something else happening beneath the surface? Something internal, something psychological, something Meghan wasn't prepared to confront. But let's rewind to the moment she first saw those pages. Actors talk about feeling the role the instant they read a script. It's instinctive, emotional, almost chemical. When they see the character on the page, they feel the rhythm, the tone, the presence. Meghan desperately needed that kind of connection for this cameo. She needed it to feel effortless, natural, faded. But when she read it for the first time, she felt something else entirely. Relief. Not excitement. Not challenge. Not the electric thrill of a complex part. Relief. Because the script was embarrassingly simple. Her entire part fit on fewer than 2 pages. 6 short lines. 3 reactions. A smile. A comedic beat. A walk-off. Exactly the kind of soft, harmless cameo you give someone you're trying to reintroduce gently into an industry that doesn't quite trust them yet. Her team celebrated it. This was perfect, they said. Light, manageable, safe, no risk, no pressure. Except they were wrong. Because sometimes the simplest scripts are the hardest to land and the hardest to survive. Let me ask you this. Have you ever had something so small go so wrong that people later don't even believe it's possible? That's what this script was. So basic that its failure became legendary. But before the disaster unfolded, Meghan approached the script with confidence. She even bragged, insiders say, that she could perform the lines inside out, upside down, half asleep, in a hurricane. But here's the contradiction. Meghan wanted to appear effortless, but she studied the script obsessively. She read it over dinner, repeated it during Pilates, practiced it walking through the house, whispered it getting ready in the morning. She recorded herself saying the lines again and again, searching for the perfect inflection, the perfect comedic tone, the perfect rhythm. Her team took this as a good sign. She was preparing. But her assistant knew better. She'd seen this pattern before. Meghan didn't rehearse like this when she was comfortable or excited. She rehearsed like this when she was afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of looking out of place. Afraid of proving her critics right. But fear is a tricky thing. It doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like ambition. Sometimes it looks like control. And sometimes it looks like a duchess micromanaging a cameo. The more Meghan rehearsed, the less natural she became. Her tone stiffened. Her comedic timing locked up. She started sounding like someone trying to perform naturalness instead of actually being natural. But that wasn't the worst part. Because a week before the shoot, something unexpected happened. Meghan asked for rewrites. Yes, rewrites. For a cameo. With 6 lines. Her team insisted it was normal. It wasn't. Cameos rarely get rewrites unless the actor is improv-based or the scene changes drastically. Here, nothing had changed. Meghan simply didn't like how the lines felt. She wanted them more elegant, more impactful, more. Meghan. The writer pushed back. The director declined. The producers gently explained that the scene wasn't about her. That stung. People who worked with her say she didn't like the idea of blending in. She wanted the cameo to sparkle. She wanted it to feel iconic, not incidental. A moment people would talk about. A moment that would trend. But cameos don't work like that. They're supporting beats, designed to complement, not overshadow. The rest of the film, Meghan didn't accept that. The rewrites were denied. And that's when the first crack appeared. According to a source familiar with the rehearsals, Meghan told her assistant later that day, "If they want basic, I'll give them basic." But she didn't say it kindly. Still, she continued rehearsing. She drilled the script harder. She told herself she would elevate the lines through performance. She memorized every comma, every punctuation point, every breath. And then she stepped onto the set. That's when everything she practiced turned into dust. Because the moment she walked under the lights, something shifted inside her. Rehearsed confidence evaporated. Timing vanished. Lines she knew by heart suddenly felt foreign, unfamiliar, slippery. But here's the question you're probably asking right now. Why? How does someone rehearse so intensely and then forget the simplest lines? Was the script too plain? Too beneath her? Did she psych herself out? Was she distracted? Nervous? Uncertain? The crew had their theories. And each theory made the situation worse. Some thought she was overwhelmed. Some thought she was trying too hard. Some thought she froze. Some thought the pressure was too much. Some thought she expected the script to adjust to her, not the other way around. But there was one theory no one dared to say out loud. Meghan wanted to control the narrative of the scene, but the scene wasn't hers to control. And when she realized she couldn't bend it to her will, she panicked internally. That panic creates a loop in the mind. Pressure, fear, tension, mistakes, more fear, more mistakes. Soon she wasn't just forgetting lines. She was forgetting how to recover from forgetting lines. She began apologizing after every slip, then explaining herself, then blaming the noise, then blaming the mark she had to hit, then blaming the timing, then blaming the transitions. The script supervisor later said it wasn't the lines. It was her relationship to the lines. She wasn't performing them. She was wrestling with them. But if you want to understand how a simple script turned into a self-sabotaging spiral, you need to see the actual lines she struggled with. We can't quote the exact copyrighted wording, but we can describe the structure. Line 1, a two-word greeting. Casual. Friendly. Line 2, a short observation. Light humor. Line 3, a playful reaction. Line 4, a simple sentence acknowledging the main character. Line 5, a comedic exit line. Line 6, a goodbye. That's it. That was the entire script. But every time Meghan delivered the greeting, she changed her tone. Every time she said the observation, she stumbled on the second phrase. Every time she attempted the comedic beat, she paused too long. Every time she acknowledged the main character, her delivery felt formal instead of natural. Every time she said the exit line, she adjusted her posture awkwardly. Every time she said goodbye, she elongated the wording. It was like watching someone try to force a spontaneous smile. The crew didn't understand. Jason Orley definitely didn't understand. But Meghan understood, at least on a subconscious level, because something deeper was happening. She wasn't connecting with the character, because the character wasn't royal. The character wasn't glamorous. The character wasn't powerful. The character wasn't important. The character was a normal person. And playing normal is something Meghan hasn't done in a long, long time. Hollywood insiders later joked privately. She didn't forget the lines. She rejected them. But at the time, no one knew what was going wrong. They only knew something was going wrong. And that's what made the tension unbearable. Every new take felt heavier. Every reset felt more awkward. Every pause felt longer. The crew wasn't frustrated yet. But they were confused, concerned, surprised. This was supposed to be easy. This was supposed to be fun. This was supposed to be Meghan's big, I'm back moment. Instead, the script had become her enemy. And then came the moment that changed everything. The slip-up so small and so strange that the entire crew suddenly realized the cameo might not survive the day. Because in the middle of take 20-something, Meghan froze mid-line. Completely. As if a switch flipped off inside her mind. The silence was long enough that the boom operator thought the audio had cut. Jason Orley leaned forward. The main actor turned around. Meghan blinked twice, looked down, and whispered something almost no one heard. I can't get this right. That's when the mood shifted decisively. Because if Meghan couldn't get the lines right, not once, not after repeated takes, not after rehearsing for weeks, what chance did the scene have? And if the scene had no chance, what would the studio do? What would the producers do? What would Jason Orley do? What would Meghan do? Because what came next wouldn't just challenge the script. It would challenge Meghan herself in ways she wasn't prepared for. And someone quietly watching from behind the glass, was about to make a decision she didn't see coming. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. It started like every other table read on a high-profile set. Early morning, coffee in hand, scripts spread across the table, and the cast and crew bracing themselves for what was supposed to be a simple run-through. But this wasn't just any table read. This was Meghan Markle's $5 million cameo, and everyone in the room already knew, consciously or not, that this scene carried stakes far beyond its 2 pages of dialogue. Stakes that could make or break reputations, careers, and, in Meghan's case, public perception. Let's start with a question. Have you ever been in a room where everyone's pretending everything is fine, but beneath the surface, tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife? That's exactly how this table read felt. Everyone smiled, nodded, and read the lines, but the unspoken energy was palpable. People were whispering. Eyes darted to monitors. The room was small enough that every frown, every pause, every subtle hesitation became magnified. From the moment Meghan walked in, she carried herself with poise. But poise, as we would soon learn, can sometimes mask panic. Her entrance was precise, shoes clicking, head high, hair perfect, outfit styled to perfection. But in her hand, the script was more than paper, it was armor. And yet, even with all the preparation, the first line nearly derailed the whole morning. The table read began innocuously enough. Cast members read their roles in turn, warm-ups were made, minor jokes were exchanged, and the director, Jason Orley, sat back, nodding with calm authority. Then Meghan came in. Everyone knew it. Cameras weren't rolling yet. But this was the moment the scene would be set in the room's collective memory. Her first attempt at reading her line? Slightly off. Just a word stumbled, a pause too long. The actors around her didn't correct her, because it was a table read, not filming. But that pause, though small, sent a ripple through the room. People leaned forward, whispered, scribbled notes. The rhythm was off, and Meghan noticed it. Then it got worse. On line 2, she flubbed a word. Not dramatically, but enough to make the table fall silent for a beat that felt like an eternity. That beat, insiders say, was the first audible sign that this cameo might be more challenging than anyone anticipated. The crew tried to keep things light, tossing small jokes to cover the tension, but those jokes barely landed. The energy in the room had shifted from anticipation to uncertainty. Meghan, in turn, reacted, subtly at first. A tightening of her jaw, a blink that lingered longer than normal, a flicker of frustration in her eyes. She knew everyone was watching. She knew the cameras would capture it eventually. She knew this moment wasn't just a rehearsal. It was the foundation of a high-stakes performance. And the table read, for better or worse, was laying bare cracks that rehearsals had not revealed. By the third line, Meghan's composure began to slip. She repeated the line multiple times, as if trying to will it into perfection. Her assistant whispered reminders, subtle cues meant to anchor her. But it only made things worse. Repetition under pressure rarely breeds confidence. Often, it breeds panic. And the irony? The lines weren't hard. They weren't Shakespearean. They didn't demand intricate emotion or complex timing. They were short, simple, meant to be breezy. The simplicity, however, became its own trap. Meghan wanted to elevate them. She wanted to shine. But the very simplicity that should have been a relief became a magnifying glass for every mistake, every hesitation, every insecurity. The director, Jason Orley, maintained a calm exterior. No raised voice. No harsh corrections. But behind his glasses, he watched every micro-expression, every pause, every misstep. He's a professional, yes, but even the most composed director can feel the weight of a high-profile cameo unraveling in real time. He leaned back, observing, calculating. Could this cameo survive the shoot? Or was it doomed before the cameras even turned on? Meanwhile, the producers were quietly taking notes. The line producers, the studio execs, the assistants. They all knew this cameo was a major investment. $5 million, after all, isn't something you throw around lightly. And when an actor, no matter how famous, struggles to deliver even the simplest lines, the room begins to hum with anxiety. If Meghan couldn't deliver in the table read, what chance did she have under lights, on cue, with cameras rolling? By line 4, Meghan's frustration became audible. Whispered apologies, small sighs, a hand brushing at her hair more often than necessary. The subtle panic was noticeable, and as much as she tried to mask it, the energy she emitted affected everyone in the room. Cast members glanced at each other, trying to gauge whether to intervene. The tension was contagious. The comedy beat, line 5, was where the table read officially derailed. It was meant to be lighthearted, a simple gesture, a reaction that should have drawn smiles from the crew. Instead, Meghan delivered it awkwardly, elongating the timing, missing the intended rhythm. A pause hung in the air, uncomfortable and unfunny. One of the supporting actors tried to cover with an improvised response, but the mismatch only amplified the misstep. This was the moment the room collectively realized that what should have been a smooth, easy, two-page cameo was turning into a minefield. Everyone present sensed the stakes rising. This wasn't just a table read anymore. It was an early warning. The script was exposing cracks in Meghan's performance that no amount of rehearsal could fix. And yet, Meghan pressed on. She wanted to show resilience. She wanted to prove she could handle this pressure. She repeated lines again. She tried different inflections. She adjusted her timing. But each variation highlighted the tension further. Then, as the final line approached, Meghan stumbled in a way that would go down in crew anecdotes forever. Mid-phrase, she froze. Not a hesitation, not a pause, but a literal freeze. The room was quiet enough that you could hear her intake of breath. Jason Orley leaned forward, eyes narrowing. The other actors exchanged a glance that screamed concern. And Meghan's assistant, seated off to the side, instinctively put a hand on her arm, but she pulled away quickly, unsure if touching her was the right move. She completed the line eventually, but the damage had been done. The rhythm was gone. The energy dissipated. The confidence that had walked into the room with her was shattered, replaced with a nervous tension so thick it could be felt across the table. Producers whispered behind glass. Crew members scribbled notes. Jason Orley scribbled a small mark on his clipboard and murmured, "We'll see." He knew the cameras weren't rolling yet, but he also knew that the pattern had been set. The cameo, as scripted, might not survive filming. Not if the performance continued like this. And here's the critical detail. The table read isn't just a rehearsal. It's a test. It's an audition in real time. The room observes everything. Timing, presence, confidence, adaptability, energy. And Meghan, for all her preparation, failed that test in subtle, yet devastating ways. But no one stopped her. No one said, "We need to pause." No one yelled. No one threw the script. There was a silent understanding. Let her try. Let her attempt. Let the process play out. Sometimes, the table read is meant to expose issues before cameras roll. Sometimes, it's meant to teach lessons. Yet the irony is cruel. The table read exposed more than issues. It exposed Meghan's internal tension, her struggles under pressure, her inability to blend effortlessly into a scene she was supposed to shine in. The irony? This was a cameo designed to be stress-free, designed to be simple, designed to be manageable, yet it became the stage for a slow, unfolding disaster. By the end of the read, the room was tense, quiet, and anticipatory. Jason Orley leaned back, removed his glasses, and exhaled. The crew didn't speak. The supporting actors didn't react. And Meghan, oblivious to the weight of judgment pressing down from every corner of the room, smiled politely, nodding as if she had conquered the exercise. She hadn't, not even close. And that, dear audience, is where the real story begins. The moment when rehearsal gave way to reality, when the line between preparation and panic blurred, and when a cameo meant to fix everything started unraveling right before everyone's eyes. Because what came next, the first on-camera take, would make the table read disaster look like a warm-up exercise. And it would force Jason Orley to confront a decision that no one ever wants to make. Cut a scene entirely, no matter the star attached. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. The lights dimmed. The cameras rolled. And the room, which had been tense but controlled during the table read, transformed instantly. Suddenly, the rehearsal energy wasn't enough. What had been theoretical pressure became real. Each click of the camera shutter, each whir of a lens focusing, every faint hum of the monitors created a weight Meghan Markle could physically feel on her shoulders. The $5 million cameo was no longer a page of dialogue. It was a living, breathing test of composure, timing, and presence. It started with the first take, a line she had rehearsed hundreds of times in private, a line that had seemed effortless when whispered to herself, repeated in the mirror, or spoken over coffee during morning preparation. But the cameras don't lie, and the cameras don't wait. As soon as she spoke, something shifted. Her voice, so confident during practice, wavered. Her timing, so precise in her mind, felt disjointed. And the room? The room felt it. Jason Orley, known for his calm demeanor, leaned forward slightly, adjusting his headset, as if sensing the fragility of the performance before him. He didn't yet intervene. He rarely did. His reputation for subtle, behind-the-scenes direction was why actors trusted him. But even he could feel the subtle tremors of panic emanating from Meghan. It wasn't obvious, not to the untrained eye, but anyone who had spent time on set could sense the mismatch. Her confidence in rehearsal versus her performance in front of rolling cameras. Have you ever experienced that moment where reality feels heavier than preparation? Where everything you thought you had mastered slips through your fingers the instant the spotlight hits? That's what the first take felt like, and everyone in that room could see it. Her first line came out choppy. Not missing words, but off cadence. The comedic beat she had hoped would land fell flat. The supporting actor, who had rehearsed in sync with her dozens of times, tried to react naturally, but the rhythm was gone. The director whispered instructions into his microphone, barely audible. Crew members scribbled notes, glancing toward Meghan with increasing concern. Take 2 wasn't much better. By now, tension was creeping into the edges of every frame. The simplicity of the script, the lines so manageable on paper, had become a trap. It required effortless timing and natural charisma. 2 things Meghan had rehearsed, but not under this kind of pressure. And the pressure was crushing. She paused midline. A minor stumble, but enough to throw off the actor waiting for the cue. Jason Orley, who had been silent, leaned back, observing. His calm mask never faltered, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. This was not the first time an actor stumbled, but it was the first time he felt that instinctive tension in the air, an almost imperceptible warning that something might be about to break. By take 3, Meghan was visibly tightening. Her shoulders stiffened. Her hands fidgeted slightly. Each line became more deliberate, slower, overthought. The assistant director leaned in, whispered encouragements. But the repeated nudges only increased the pressure. The subtle psychological loop of expectation versus reality had kicked in. The more she tried to perform perfectly, the more the lines slipped, and the more she slipped, the harder she tried. Let's pause for a second. This is the moment where psychology and performance collide. Under normal circumstances, an actor can recover from a small stumble. A pause here, or there is negligible. But add a high-profile, high-stakes cameo into the mix, throw in cameras rolling, executives watching through the monitors, and the pressure multiplies exponentially. What should have been a minor hiccup becomes a magnified, glaring problem. And it wasn't just Meghan. The supporting actor, whose lines depended on hers, started hesitating slightly. The rhythm of the scene faltered. The camera operators exchanged quick glances. Lighting cues, subtle but essential, fell off because timing was off. The set, the crew, the actors, all were caught in a ripple effect initiated by a single crack. Take 4. Worse. Meghan stumbled on a line she had perfected in private. She paused. She glanced at her assistant. She tried again. Then she laughed nervously, an attempt to cover her anxiety, but it rang false. The sound echoed across the monitors, bouncing off the walls, reverberating in a room already brimming with tension. Crew members shifted uneasily. The room smelled of stress, caffeine, and a hint of perfume. Every movement, every breath, carried weight. And here's where it gets interesting. The simplicity of the script, the same simplicity that was supposed to protect her, now became her nemesis. In rehearsal, simplicity allowed for confidence. On camera, simplicity offered no distractions. Nothing to hide behind. Every flaw was visible. Every hesitation was amplified. And Meghan, accustomed to controlling every detail, found herself powerless. The director, Jason Orley, spoke. Calm, measured, barely audible. Reset. Let's go again. Focus. A simple instruction. But under pressure, it felt like a command from a general at war. Meghan nodded, trying to summon the confidence she had felt in rehearsal. But the moment the cameras clicked again, it happened. Lines that had survived repeated practice crumbled. Timing faltered. A comedic beat that should have drawn a smile landed awkwardly. Her facial expressions, carefully practiced, appeared stiff. Her eyes darted slightly, betraying an inner panic. Now, imagine watching this unfold as the production team did. $5 million on the line. A star performer struggling. Cameras capturing every misstep. The crew whispering among themselves. And the director, silent but attentive, weighing each second. Every failed take added pressure. Every repeated line increased anxiety. Every subtle miscue foreshadowed a decision that would soon become unavoidable. By take 6, Meghan's panic was visible to anyone with even a casual eye. Her jaw tightened. Her breathing shifted. Her movements became smaller, more controlled, less natural. She tried to force charm, charisma, humor, but in doing so, she appeared increasingly artificial. The supporting actors reacted cautiously, unsure whether to improvise or stick to the script. The room's energy became taut, like a wire stretched to breaking. And then the moment came that would define the entire shoot. Mid-take, Meghan froze. Midline, mid-breath. She blinked, paused, and whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, I can't get it right. That pause, a fleeting moment, changed everything. The room held its collective breath. Jason Orley leaned forward, headset in hand, exhaling quietly. The supporting actor stopped, unsure how to respond. Crew members looked at each other. Silence stretched longer than any single line should. This was the first moment where it became clear. The cameo, simple as it was on paper, might not survive filming. Not if Meghan continued to struggle under the gaze of cameras, crew, and executives. The $5 million scene, the moment meant to restore her Hollywood credibility, was teetering on the edge of disaster. And here's the kicker. No one spoke. Not yet. No one yelled. No one intervened. Everyone waited. Because the first intervention could trigger a meltdown, and a meltdown now could cost even more than a cut scene. The tension mounted. Take 7 started. Meghan tried again. This time, her voice shook slightly. Her comedic timing was off. She smiled, but it was forced. Every detail, posture, expression, line delivery, felt manufactured. The room collectively recognized it. Something had to change. Jason Orley, who had maintained a calm exterior throughout, finally made his move. He exhaled, lowered his headset, and whispered something under his breath. Then, with quiet authority, he stepped onto the set, signaling the moment that would pivot the entire cameo. And what came next would set the stage for a decision that no one, not even Meghan, saw coming. Because the cameras didn't stop rolling, yet. But in the tension-filled air of that room, everyone knew something was about to explode. It's one thing to watch a scene unfold and sense tension. It's quite another to feel the weight of an impending disaster pressing down on every frame, every crew member, every moment of performance. Jason Orley, despite his calm reputation, felt it in the pit of his stomach the instant Meghan Markle froze midline during take 7. That pause, brief as it was, wasn't just a line forgotten. It was a seismic event in the delicate ecosystem of the set. Orley was a professional. He had worked with temperamental stars, unpredictable child actors, method actors who disappeared into roles for weeks, and notoriously high-maintenance celebrities who believed the world revolved around them. But he had never encountered a moment quite like this. A cameo, so seemingly simple, so supposedly risk-free, was unraveling faster than any film could recover. And what made it worse, insiders say, was the stakes attached. $5 million on the cameo, a media frenzy waiting in the wings, and a star who was not accustomed to being corrected. Orley's breaking point wasn't instantaneous. It was a slow build. Every stumble Meghan made, every hesitation, every artificially forced reaction created invisible cracks that widened with each repeated take. Crew members began whispering, adjusting monitors, glancing nervously at him. They weren't complaining. They were signaling tension. Even the most seasoned script supervisors and assistants could sense that if he didn't act soon, this cameo might implode entirely. Let's pause for context. Directing is often about observation. You watch the performance, analyze the timing, the emotion, the energy, and then, when necessary, you intervene. Orley had intervened countless times in his career, but this situation was unique. With Meghan, intervention wasn't a simple word of encouragement or a gentle redirection. Every comment could be misconstrued. Every direction could trigger a defensive reaction, and every reaction had the potential to spiral into a PR nightmare. Have you ever had to make a decision where the stakes are enormous and every choice carries risks in multiple directions? That's exactly where Orley stood. And yet, in his experience, sometimes the quietest, smallest interventions carry the greatest weight. At first, he tried subtlety. A slight hand gesture here. A barely audible cue there. Soft words whispered through the headset to the assistant director. Even small, nonverbal adjustments to lighting and camera angles were attempts to salvage the scene without drawing attention. But subtlety only goes so far when the performer's internal tension has begun dictating every move. Meghan's every shift, every inflection, every unnatural pause created a feedback loop. The more she tried to impress, the more she faltered. The more she faltered, the more pressure she applied to herself. Take 8 was critical. Orley sat back, hands folded, watching the playback on his monitor. Every line she delivered seemed slightly off-kilter. The pauses stretched unnaturally. The smiles didn't reach her eyes. The comedic timing, the one thing this cameo was supposed to hinge on, was collapsing. The supporting actor reacted cautiously, unsure if improvisation was appropriate or if it would worsen the situation. At this point, insiders say, Orley realized something pivotal. This wasn't a performance issue. This was a psychological battle. The script wasn't the problem. The lines weren't the problem. Meghan herself had become the battlefield. And he, as the director, was trapped in the impossible position of navigating an unraveling performance while preserving the integrity of the production. He exhaled through his teeth, adjusted his headset, leaned forward, Something had to give. And then it happened. Meghan attempted the comedic beat yet again, stretching it far longer than the scene required. She laughed nervously, glanced at her assistant, attempted to recover midline, and stumbled. The room collectively exhaled, but the tension didn't dissipate. It thickened. The cameras captured it all, even though nothing had been said. Orley's breaking point wasn't just about the mistake itself. It was the pattern. Repeated mistakes, repeated hesitations, repeated overcompensations. Every take revealed that Meghan was trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape. Performance anxiety amplified by high stakes, amplified by cameras, amplified by self-expectation. Let's be clear. Orley wasn't angry. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't storming around the set. His breaking point was quieter, more internal. It was a professional recognition that this cameo, as it currently existed, was no longer sustainable. He knew the next decision, what he did or didn't do, would define the rest of the day and potentially Meghan's credibility in the industry. At that moment, he made a small but critical move. He paused the cameras. Not dramatically, not with yelling or fanfare. Simply a press of a button, a quiet hold, and the room froze. Meghan blinked, startled. Crew members straightened. Supporting actors exchanged glances. And Orley stepped forward. The weight of the decision was palpable. He didn't yet speak. He didn't need to. The quiet command of his presence conveyed it all. He was considering an intervention of significance. In that pause, multiple conversations happened silently. Executive eyes darted toward each other. Producers whispered through their earpieces. The assistants held their breath. And Meghan? She wasn't fully aware of the gravity, only sensing something in the room shifting. According to sources, Orley's thought process was meticulous. 1. Assess whether the performance could improve with guidance. 2. Consider the impact on morale and crew. 3. Weigh the financial implications of reshoots. 4. Anticipate public perception if the cameo failed. 5. Plan the next step in a way that preserved dignity and production value. And then he made the call that would ultimately trigger a chain reaction. He stepped into the line of sight, headset removed, calm but firm, signaling that this cameo required a more serious intervention than gentle adjustments or whispered cues. What followed next? His decision to halt the scene, regroup, and confront the emerging issues head-on would be the beginning of the unraveling of the $5 million cameo. What Meghan thought would be a smooth, high-profile triumph was now teetering on the edge of disaster, and everyone knew it. But even in that tension, one critical factor remained uncertain. How would Meghan react when she realized just how precarious the situation had become? Because Orley's breaking point was just the beginning, and what came next would ignite a sequence of events no one on set could have predicted. Have you ever been in a room where everyone knows something that one person doesn't? That unspoken awareness, shared silently, creates tension and electricity, an invisible network of whispers, glances, and subtle movements. That's exactly what had formed on the set the morning Meghan Markle's cameo began to unravel. The crew, seasoned professionals who had seen countless stars stumble under pressure, were exchanging information without words. They called it the Whisper Network, a quiet method of communicating concern, confusion, or even alarm without alerting the person at the center of the storm. It started small. A glance between the script supervisor and the assistant director. A subtle nod toward the monitor where Meghan's performance was being reviewed in real time. A brief tap on a clipboard to signal that a line had been flubbed. These were minor, professional gestures. Silent, coded messages that, cumulatively, conveyed the growing realization that something wasn't right. What the crew understood, instinctively, was that Meghan's struggle wasn't merely about forgetting lines. It was about pattern recognition. The more the cameo continued, the more the team noticed recurring behaviors: hesitation, overcompensation, forced expressions, repeated attempts to correct her timing mid-performance. Each take revealed a subtle but unmistakable shift in energy, and everyone in the network absorbed it immediately. Inside the network, whispers circulated. Not gossip. Well, sometimes gossip, but assessments, observations, predictions. Who might intervene first? Would the director step in? Would producers order a reshoot? Could the cameo survive the next take? What were the financial implications if the scene had to be scrapped? These whispers weren't idle chatter. They were survival mechanisms. Every crew member had a stake in how this unfolded. Camera operators relied on timing. Lighting technicians needed cues. Makeup and wardrobe had to ensure continuity. Even minor missteps could cascade into delays costing thousands of dollars per minute. The stakes were financial, professional, and personal. Everyone knew that a high-profile failure could reflect poorly on the team, not just on Meghan. And then came the subtle, almost imperceptible shift that escalated tension. The whispers began leaking to people outside the immediate production team. Assistants, who usually remained invisible, started exchanging updates with studio execs via text messages. Producers in adjacent offices began dialing in, checking monitors discreetly, sending cryptic instructions to the set. Suddenly, the quiet awareness of the room had grown into a small but powerful chain reaction of information. Meanwhile, Meghan remained largely unaware of the network operating around her. She felt the pressure in an abstract sense, the subtle tension in the air, the collective nervous energy, but she did not know the extent to which her team and crew had assessed her performance, discussed her mistakes, and anticipated potential disasters. All she knew was that something felt off. That instinctive, almost psychic sense that things weren't going smoothly, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly why. And the truth is, in these situations, perception matters more than reality. Meghan felt tension, and she reacted instinctively. Short, sharp breaths, repeated self-corrections, nervous gestures, an attempt to assert control over the performance she had already rehearsed countless times. But for the crew, every gesture confirmed their fears. The CAMEO might not survive. The Whisper Network worked in cycles. Observations were noted, predictions were formulated, silent advice was transmitted. Crew members used subtle signals to coordinate interventions. A raised eyebrow, a hand gesture, a quick glance toward the director's monitor. Each small action ensured that the room remained synchronized despite the growing uncertainty. And here's the critical point. The Whisper Network wasn't malicious. It wasn't conspiratorial. It was practical. It existed to maintain efficiency, reduce chaos, and prepare the set for decisions that might have to be made swiftly and decisively. The professionals knew that when Meghan's tension reached a peak, action would be required, and they needed to be ready to respond without causing a public spectacle. Inside the network, the predictions were stark. If Meghan continued forgetting lines under pressure, Orley would eventually have to make a decision to either halt filming, call for reshoots, or, most dramatically, cut the scene entirely. Every member of the crew understood the financial implications, the PR fallout, and the personal consequences. The stakes were enormous, and as the takes continued, the whispers grew louder, though still inaudible to Meghan. Camera operators exchanged brief hand signals. Lighting technicians adjusted subtle cues to compensate for timing errors. Makeup and wardrobe noted continuity risks. Every aspect of production was now running in parallel with the network, each node aware of the others, each person silently strategizing, predicting, and preparing for action. Meanwhile, Meghan, still attempting to deliver a perfect performance, unknowingly amplified the network's activity. Her pauses, her stumbles, her nervous corrections, all these behaviors fed the system. Every error increased observation, increased discussion, increased subtle coordination. She became the central node of the network, the focus of attention without ever knowing it. And that, insiders say, is where things began to spiral. Because while the Whisper Network served a functional purpose, it also created an invisible feedback loop. The more the crew observed, the more they worried. The more they worried, the more adjustments were made. The more adjustments were made, the more visible Meghan's tension became. And the more visible her tension became, the more the network activated, creating a self-perpetuating cycle. By mid-morning, the network had reached a critical mass. Observations were flowing rapidly. Predictions were being cross-checked. Contingency plans were whispered about. What if the scene had to be cut? What if reshoots were necessary? What if Meghan refused direction? Everyone was now preparing for the possibility that the CAMEO might fail entirely. And the first decision point had arrived. Jason Orley, who had already approached his breaking point, now had the Whisper Network feeding him real-time feedback from every corner of the set. Subtle signals, quiet glances, and coded gestures confirmed what he already suspected. The CAMEO could not continue without intervention. The network, while silent, had made its collective judgment. Action was required. And yet, Meghan remained largely unaware. She continued, line after line, attempting to deliver perfection. The tension in her body, the faltering timing, the nervous gestures, these were all feeding the whisper network, reinforcing the prediction that something drastic would soon have to happen. The irony of it all, insiders note, is that the whisper network itself became a character in the unfolding drama. Its presence, invisible to Meghan, influenced every move on set. Decisions were preemptively considered. Actions were coordinated. The professional ecosystem was operating as a single organism, waiting for the moment when Orley would step in.